Hello and welcome to Talking About UK Property. Today we have Steve McDonald from Inksters. This is actually part two of a two-part interview. Hopefully you'll get to see part one, which was an introduction to the whole conveyancing process, or if not an introduction, then a bit more information about what happens in the background. It was very interesting. And now we're going to chat about kind of last year, I think, and was it last year that the ADS increased? Anyway, some stuff that's happened recently, and we're really interested to know how that affected sales that Steve was dealing with. So, did I say Steve, solicitor, conveyancing solicitor for Inksters? Great guy. Steve, how was it for you, so to speak?
Yeah, the ADS change was quite well, it wasn't entirely unexpected. I think the thing that was most unexpected was the timing of when it came in, and I remember watching the Scottish Parliament at 4 p.m. and hearing about the change and how it was going to happen, and we were getting messages that were going around the office saying, when is this going to kick in? When is it effective from? And no one was saying. And we got to the end of the broadcast and everything, and nobody was any the wiser. And then Revenue Scotland issued something about 5 o'clock, and a lot of solicitors, I think, would have logged off and would have gone home by then. I was still working, saw the communication, and when I looked at it, I realised that it was going to be effective from midnight. So there was 7 hours basically to take any action and deal with anything, and to try and save some deals maybe. And there were a couple of ongoing cases that I had that I was immediately thinking of. One was completing the following day, and didn't have concluded missives because we were waiting on funds coming and to make sure we had guaranteed funds. So I knew that if we didn't get a contract concluded that night, then we were going to be in a situation where the client was going to be due an extra 2% tax and might not have been able to complete the deal. So I called the other solicitor and said, have you just seen this? We've got to get missives concluded tonight, otherwise the whole deal could be down the pan. So she and I basically agreed to work late, and between us and the clients, we got missives concluded by about 9 o'clock that evening and got everything agreed. We had a concluded missive, which meant that because missives were concluded before the midnight, the old rules applied, and we could settle the transaction the next day with the same price and complete it. So that was one we were able to get done. And I heard of other cases where deals fell through, not in my cases, but I've heard of other lawyers I know that had deals falling through because the clients were suddenly due an extra 20 grand in tax overnight and couldn't complete deals, so deals were falling through. And it was probably, the timing was kind of sneaky from the government and the taxman, because they were picking a day that was probably one of the biggest days for completions in the calendar year, the last full working Friday before Christmas, which that day, scary number of completions that day. So it's I hate to think how many transactions probably fell through because they didn't have a concluded contract, again because somebody was being cautious and waiting to make sure loan funds were through in time before concluding missives, not realizing that there was a tax change going to happen overnight. And I had other deals where clients had to renegotiate deals. One deal I just completed actually, where the client had no option because there wasn't enough in the pot because of the tax increase. So I had to go to the other side and renegotiate the purchase price. And I'm sure that's happened quite a lot in cases. Sellers probably not wanting to lose deals were probably agreeing to reduce prices to make sure deals still happened. And
yeah, that's quite. I mean, that was a good effort on your part, Steve, for doing that in the evening, because it would only work if the other side was happy to sort of cooperate and work during the evening. So I imagine there's a lot of fax machines being worked overdrive in the evening, or those that when it happened. But the renegotiation, the renegotiation of deals is quite interesting. It probably takes us on to what happened through the mini budget and how often that happens during conveyancing, where one side wants to renegotiate, and how that's looked on by the other side about, you know, they probably hate doing that,
Yeah.
but they probably think, well, if I need to keep it on track because we're a couple of weeks away from completion, but it's not the done thing, isn't it? It's frowned upon.
It is frowned upon. I mean, technically speaking, in our practice rules, we can be required to withdraw from acting if we approach another side in a deal and ask them to reduce the price after we've got an agreed price at the beginning. In terms of our loss active practice rules, we're told that we should withdraw from acting in those circumstances. So I have to really get the consent of the other firm in those circumstances. If they're happy enough to continue dealing with me in these deals, and I have to say that to the client, so you may have to get a different firm to act for you if we're going to reduce the price at this stage, because that wasn't the deal. But in cases like that, when there's a material change in circumstances because there's been a tax change or something's happened with the mortgage product, or again, you know, there's been lots of turmoil in the mortgage market and changes in products and things, products being pulled because of market conditions in the economy. Some clients have had mortgages withdrawn, or mortgage offers withdrawn, and or things have just not gone to offer after they've had something agreed in principle at the beginning. And so in those circumstances, clients have no option, either pay what they can afford or walk away. And the seller, unfortunately, in these circumstances, has to make some choices. They either take a hit on it, they may have another deal themselves that's following on from that sale, so they may have their hands tied to an extent as well. They may have no choice, and they may have to try and do the same thing in their purchase. So there's this whole knock-on effect sometimes with when there's a change, whether it's a mini budget or a tax change or a change in policy by mortgage lenders. All these things can have a real impact. And sometimes your practice rules are the best rule in the world. It's you stay on the right side of the law society, but at the end of the day, if your client's instructing you to do something, you can walk away, but it causes sometimes even more inconvenience if another firm has to get involved. It's sometimes better to get an agreement with the other firm and you know, and say, well, this is the situation, you know, can we get this completed? Are you happy for me to carry on acting? You're not going to report me for carrying on acting for the client. And
yeah, it's a nightmare scenario to happen for both sides.
Yeah.
But you must go into the calendar year and think, actually, X amount of sales will not complete. What percentage of sales do you sort of work on that actually doesn't complete for various reasons? And that's just natural. It wouldn't be 100% of deals you're getting over the line. So what do you normally work on?
It's still quite a high percentage actually complete, because usually the lawyer does their due diligence at the start, and they normally know if a client can fund the deal or not, you know, because you speak to them and say, well, have you got a mortgage agreed in principle? How much is it going to be? What savings have you got? What cash have you got in the bank? What's your plan? You know, can you pay all the tax? Here are all the figures. You give them an estimate so they know all the costs involved. Can you afford this? And that's really what you have to do in every case, really. And there shouldn't be any surprises really over the figures and things. So it sometimes comes down to whether or not the broker can get the mortgage to go to the full offer after getting the decision in principle. And one of the issues I've found where deals have fallen through in some of my sales have been because the decision in principle has been given by the lender and approved for the purchaser, and then during the process they've applied stricter criteria because of changes in economic conditions, and as a result of that they've ended up with not going to offer, or they've offered them not as much as they were expecting. So that's caused a problem as well. It's just, we'll say, well, we'll still do it, but we're only going to give you X amount because of affordability, because of energy costs, or there's something in their monthly outgoings that's suddenly going up that they think, well, it's affordability is the test. We're not going to be able to offer the same amount. So
yeah, the same.
High percentage still settled though, you know, or you get it on a resale. You know, you get it on a resale sometimes, but sometimes it's. I've got two just now where I've had to go back on the market because of lending was pulled in them, so they managed to get them sold again, and it's just taken a bit longer. It's knocked it on 3-4 months, but it'll still happen.
Yeah, so. No, I mean it is always a it's a bad thing when a sale falls through. You know, in that stage, it's really unfortunate. Thankfully, it doesn't happen very often, especially probably with I think anyway with buy-to-let, it's most likely to happen because there's no chain.
No.
There's just less things potentially that could go wrong. I mean,
yeah. And when it does, I suppose, Chris, when it does go wrong, often we talk about the fact that, you know, the tenant's still in the property, they're still paying the rent. So it's not as if they've got a vacant property and the sales sort of, it's, as Steve said, you know, 3 months down the line before the sale happens again, you're still getting your rental income in.
Yeah, exactly. The property's empty, you know, and you're not living in it or anything like that. Yeah, it's all very much more impactful.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you know, we weathered that okay. I remember. It's weird. I couldn't quite remember exactly when the big ADS increase happened. You know, if you told me it was last week, I would have gone, yeah, it sounds about right. But yeah, no, I remember it's been just before Christmas, and I was driving back to home from the office, and somebody phoned me and said, have you heard? And like, what? So I've got to turn the radio on, but I've got to phone Ross first. So I phoned Ross, turn the radio on. So he had the radio on, and then we're both listening to it. And it was exactly like you said, okay, but when's it going to happen? Probably be April, you know, next year, next tax year or something. And then they said on the radio, tomorrow, the word tomorrow. And I was reaching for like the button to phone Ross, and as I was doing that, he was phoning me. So obviously, it just answered the phone. It's like tomorrow, you know. Couldn't believe it. It was something else. And as you say, it was a little bit sneaky because it was such a big day with so many sales due to complete. And I think it might have backfired, though. I don't know if they.
Well, the Law Society didn't inform the profession because it was the morning after. So the Law Society, before they were able to get communication out to all the member firms, so we all had the email about 10 in the morning. But by then, you know, you're trying to complete. There's a lot of people just didn't even know. I think they were dealing with transactions that didn't know about it or hadn't heard, and I think that's the knock-on of these things. It's in the past, there's been changes to tax rates. I remember 2016, I think it was, they introduced it. So everyone had a march from hell, to be honest, because everyone was trying to complete transactions during March because 1st of April, the ADS was introduced. And it was, so that was when it came in the first place. And I remember, how stressful that was for a lot of firms trying to get deals done during that month. Everyone probably thought there was a bit of a lead-in time, but it's not this time. So,
and then you know, obviously the mini budget interest rates and stuff, but things are seeming calmer now. You know, we were talking before we started recording that you know, we're doing well. We're getting sales.
yeah.
I think interest rates did just go up there this week, but hopefully there'll be just a calmer rest of the year.
I think so. I think anytime there's uncertainty over the economy, it definitely does affect people's decisions because people hold off to wait to see what's going to happen. And I have had purchasers looking at deals and thought, well, things have changed now. It's not the same. I'm a bit more cautious at times, but there's also definitely an approach I'm finding with clients that because there's a bit of uncertainty, they are sometimes at closing dates offering a bit less. They're not going overboard when it comes to percentages over at closing dates. Not some of the ones I'm acting for anyway. They've definitely pulled in the reins a little bit, and
Mm.
interestingly, managed to get a few offers accepted for reasonable prices. You know, a year ago or before the war, I probably wouldn't have been able to get the same deal, and would have sold for much higher prices. But that's just my own experience with them. So, but certainly, a little bit more caution on the purchaser side. I think still a little bit, but definitely
there's still there's a lot less buyers. There's fewer buyers out there than there was last year, but there still seems to be a lack of stock. There doesn't seem to be. So if it's a particular property in a particular area, it's still from Chris and I's experience of selling some properties, it's still going for a little bit over home report value, not necessarily tenanted stock, but if you've got a vacant property, it's a different proposition for a home buyer than a property investor.
It definitely helps. I think it's easier definitely to secure something at a closing date because there are less buyers, as you say. I think because the buy-to-let market, there's still if there's a sitting tenant who is paying rent and there's income there from day one, then it's still a good option for somebody rather than having to, I suppose, take a risk on a property that you still need to find a tenant, you need to get everything organised, you need to really do the property up. If you've got something that's ready to go, like what you guys do, it's a good deal for somebody, and they know up front what's coming, which is good. So if they get the right price agreed, everyone's happy with, and they know the rent, it kind of makes sense. But it's sometimes hard to find. I think in Edinburgh, because the supply and demand for properties, there's always going to be more demand than supply, I think, in Edinburgh. So it does keep the prices up. Whereas other areas I've seen, places like Aberdeen and things like that, I mean, it's a really volatile market there. You just never know.
Aberdeen is its own
it's crazy.
entirely. I'm not sure whether things will have changed much there, because things have changed already so much. We deal with a lot of Aberdeen properties, Aberdeen landlords, and we've had some decent results, but it's all relative. Everything's relative, and what we talk about always is a fair sale price. So we're still getting fair sale prices, and that ones that are shared success. So the people that buy them, as you've said, they're very happy. Selling, they've sold at a price that helps them achieve their goals too. So it's working. It's still working.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot, Steve. Cheers
You're
for sharing your insights, and that sounded like a good effort as well, saving that deal, working late on that big night for the ADS night. I don't know what we'll call that night, but that particular night.
I know. I'm not quite sure what to call that one, but but no, definitely it was good. One happy client anyway as a result of that, so that was good.
Good effort. Thanks again, Steve. Thanks for listening. Hopefully it's been interesting.
Yeah, not a problem.
Watching, stroke listening.
Thanks for asking. No worries.
Great.